The gun was pointed directly at the man in the expensive suit when Sarah Blackthorne made the stupidest decision of her life. She launched herself from the fire escape, crashing into the gunman just as his fingers squeezed the trigger. The bullet went wide, shattering a storefront window 3 blocks down Fifth Avenue. The impact sent all 3 of them tumbling onto the wet Manhattan pavement. "Get off me." The gunman struggled beneath her weight, his weapon skittering across the asphalt. Sarah rolled away, her ribs screaming in protest from sleeping on concrete for the past 2 weeks. The man in the suit was already on his feet, faster than anyone had a right to be. He kicked the gun into a storm drain with practiced efficiency, then turned to face his would-be assassin. His dark eyes held no fear, only cold calculation. "Who sent you?" His accent carried the refined edge of old money and foreign education. The gunman spat blood and scrambled backward. "This isn't over, Prince." "Prince?" Sarah's stomach dropped as the pieces clicked together. She'd just saved some foreign royalty from getting murdered in broad daylight. In New York. On a Tuesday, the gunman disappeared into the crowd of curious onlookers, leaving Sarah alone with a man who looked like he'd stepped out of a luxury magazine. His charcoal suit probably cost more than most people made in a year, and his dark hair was perfectly styled despite having just survived an assassination attempt. "You saved my life." He studied her with the intensity of someone accustomed to reading people quickly. "Why?" Sarah wiped blood from her split lip, keenly aware of her torn jeans and the fact that she hadn't showered in 3 days. Wrong place, wrong time. Seemed like the right thing to do. Most people would have called the police. Most people have phones that work. She gestured to the cracked screen of her ancient device. Besides, cops take forever to show up in this neighborhood. He pulled out a sleek smartphone and made a call in rapid Arabic, his voice low and commanding. Whatever he said made the person on the other end respond immediately. When he hung up, 3 black SUVs were already pulling up to the curb. "I am Zahir al-Rashid," he said, extending his hand. "And I believe fate has brought us together for a reason." Sarah didn't take his hand. "Fate doesn't pay rent, Your Highness." His lips twitched in what might have been amusement. "You know who I am." Lucky guess. The accent, the bodyguards who appeared out of nowhere, the fact that someone just tried to kill you in the middle of Manhattan. She shrugged. "Either you're royalty or you're in the mob. You're too clean for the mob. I have a proposition for you, Miss Sarah." Just Sarah. Miss Sarah. He stepped closer, and she caught the scent of expensive cologne mixed with something darker. "I need your help with a matter of utmost importance. In return, I'm prepared to offer you $10 million. The number hit her like a physical blow. $10 million. Enough to pay off Brooklyn's debt to those loan sharks with enough left over to disappear forever. Enough to save her sister's life. What kind of help? Her voice came out steadier than she felt. The kind that requires absolute discretion and a legally binding contract. His eyes never left hers. "I need you to bear my child." The world tilted sideways. Of all the things she'd expected him to say, that wasn't even on the list. "Excuse me. An heir. A legitimate heir, born within the next 18 months, or I lose everything I've worked to build." His voice carried the weight of desperation carefully controlled. "You saved my life today. Perhaps you can save it again." "You're insane." She backed away from him, her heart hammering against her ribs. "You don't know anything about me. I know you're brave. I know you're desperate enough to be living on the streets despite clearly being educated. I know you're not wearing a wedding ring. And I know you need money badly enough to consider an offer that sounds impossible." He paused. "Am I wrong about any of that?" She wanted to tell him he was wrong about everything, but the words stuck in her throat. Brooklyn's voice echoed in her memory from their last phone call. "They're giving me 1 more week, Sarah. After that, they're going to start breaking bones." "This is crazy," she whispered. "Crazy enough to work." He reached into his jacket and pulled out a business card. "My hotel. Penthouse suite. If you decide you're interested in hearing the full terms, come by tomorrow evening." The card felt warm in her hand, the embossed letters catching the afternoon light. "And if I don't, then you walk away, and we never see each other again." He moved toward the waiting SUV. "But Miss Sarah, I think we both know you'll come." The convoy pulled away, leaving her standing alone on the sidewalk with a business card that felt like it weighed 1,000 pounds. $10 million. A prince's baby. A sister who needed saving. She looked up at the sky, gray clouds gathering for another storm, and wondered if she'd just been offered salvation or signed her own death warrant. Either way, Brooklyn would live. And sometimes, that was the only choice that mattered. The card went into her pocket, and Sarah Blackthorne walked toward a future she never could have imagined. The Plaza Hotel's penthouse elevator felt like a golden cage ascending to heaven or hell. Sarah couldn't decide which. 24 hours had passed since the assassination attempt. 24 hours of sleeping in Central Park and thinking about Brooklyn's terrified voice on the phone. The loan sharks had already broken her sister's pinky finger as a warning. Next week, they promised something worse. The elevator doors opened to reveal a space that redefined luxury. Floor-to-ceiling windows showcased Manhattan's glittering skyline, while Persian rugs covered marble floors that probably cost more than most houses. Prince Zahir al-Rashid sat behind an antique desk, signing documents with a gold pen. He looked up as she entered, his dark eyes taking in her cleaned-up appearance. She'd managed a shower at a gym and borrowed clothes from a friend who worked in catering. The black dress was simple but respectable, though it couldn't hide the desperation she carried like a second skin. "You came." He set down his pen and gestured to a leather chair across from his desk. "I wasn't certain you would. $10 million is hard to ignore." She remained standing, unwilling to give him the psychological advantage of looking down at her. Even when it comes with impossible strings attached. "Nothing is impossible, Miss Blackthorne. Only expensive." The use of her full name made her freeze. "How do you know my last name?" "I make it my business to know who saves my life." He opened a manila folder on his desk. Serafina Blackthorne, age 26. Former investment banker at Morrison & Associates until the firm collapsed 18 months ago. Parents deceased. One younger sister named Brooklyn currently residing in Chicago. No criminal record, excellent credit until recently. Heat flooded her face. "You had me investigated. I had you researched. There's a difference." His voice carried no apology. "I don't make $10 million investments blindly." "Is that what this is? An investment? The most important one of my life." He closed the folder and leaned back in his chair. "My country operates under ancient succession laws. If I don't produce an heir before my 30th birthday, the throne passes to my cousin Darius. That gives me exactly 18 months. So get married. Find some princess or socialite who actually wants to have royal babies. Marriage requires time I don't have. It requires negotiations between families, treaties, political arrangements that could take years." His jaw tightened. "I need a solution that's immediate and discreet. What you need is therapy." She turned toward the elevator. "This is insane. Your sister owes $200,000 to Vincent Carrera's organization." The words hit her like ice water. She spun around to face him. "How do you know about that?" "The same way I know they've already started collecting. The same way I know you have 6 days left before they escalate from broken fingers to broken bones." He stood and moved around the desk. "I can make that debt disappear with a single phone call. Vincent Carrera doesn't just forgive debts. He does when a foreign government offers him certain considerations regarding his business interests overseas." Zahir's smile held no warmth. "Money talks, Miss Blackthorne. Power talks louder." The room felt like it was shrinking around her. "You're talking about buying a human being. I'm talking about a mutually beneficial arrangement between two consenting adults." He pulled out a thick legal document. 1 year of your life. 9 months of pregnancy, 3 months of recovery. In exchange, $10 million, your sister's safety, and a child who will want for nothing. And after that year, you disappear. New identity if you want it, enough money to start over anywhere in the world. The child remains with me, raised as the heir to Kadesh. She stared at the contract, its pages thick with legal terminology and clauses. "You've really thought this through." "I've had to." Something flickered in his eyes, almost like vulnerability. "This isn't how I imagined my life would go either." The admission surprised her. For a moment, he looked less like an untouchable prince and more like a man trapped by circumstances beyond his control. The moment passed quickly, his mask of composed authority sliding back into place. "I need time to think. Time is the one thing neither of us has." He moved closer, and she caught that scent again. Expensive cologne and something indefinably masculine. "Your sister has 6 days. I have 18 months. Every day we delay is a day we can't afford to lose." This is crazy. But even as she said it, she was thinking about Brooklyn's broken finger, about the fear in her sister's voice, about the men who would keep hurting her until the debt was paid. Crazy situations require crazy solutions. He held out a pen. I'm offering you a way out, Sarah. For both of us. She looked at the pen, then at his face. What aren't you telling me? Nothing that affects our arrangement. That's not the same thing as nothing. His expression hardened. Some secrets are mine to keep. The elevator chimed, and a man in an expensive suit stepped out. He was older than Zahir, with silver hair and cold blue eyes that seemed to catalog everything in the room, including her. Your Highness. The man's voice carried a British accent and barely concealed disapproval. I wasn't aware you had a meeting scheduled. Darius. Zahir's tone cooled noticeably. This is a private matter. I'm sure it is. Darius's gaze lingered on Sarah with obvious distaste. Perhaps we should discuss the trade negotiations privately. Perhaps you should have called ahead. Zahir stepped slightly in front of Sarah, a protective gesture that seemed automatic. We'll speak tomorrow. Darius smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. Of course, though I do hope you're being careful about the company you keep. Reputation is everything in our line of work. After he left, the tension in the room ratcheted up several notches. Zahir ran a hand through his hair, the first crack in his composed facade she'd seen. Who was that? My cousin. My potential successor. My biggest problem. He picked up the contract again. Which is why I need your answer now. Sarah thought about Brooklyn, about the loan sharks, about a future where her sister was safe and she had enough money to disappear forever. Then she looked at Zahir, this prince with secrets in his eyes and desperation carefully hidden behind royal bearing. If I do this, she said slowly, I want half the money up front. Done. And I want your word that my sister will be protected until this is over. You have it. She took the pen from his hand, their fingers brushing for just a moment. The contact sent an unexpected jolt through her, and from the way his eyes widened slightly, he felt it too. 1 year, she said, signing her name at the bottom of the contract. 1 year, he agreed. Neither of them mentioned that some agreements change everything, or that 1 year can feel like a lifetime when you're falling for someone you're supposed to forget. The mansion in the Hamptons was a prison disguised as paradise. Sarah stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows of what Zahir had called her suite, watching waves crash against the private beach below. 3 weeks had passed since she'd signed the contract. 3 weeks of living in luxury while feeling like a bird in a gilded cage. The medical procedures had been completed with clinical efficiency, artificial insemination performed by the best fertility specialists money could buy. Your breakfast, miss. Maria, the housekeeper, set a silver tray on the marble table. The woman's English carried a slight Spanish accent, and her eyes held a kindness that Sarah desperately needed. Thank you. Sarah turned from the window. Has Prince Zahir returned from the city? Not yet. He called to say he'll be late again tonight. Maria hesitated. Perhaps you'd like to join me in the garden? The roses are beautiful this time of year. I'm supposed to stay inside until the doctor confirms the pregnancy. The words tasted bitter. She was a thoroughbred being monitored for breeding success. After Maria left, Sarah picked at her breakfast and tried not to think about the golden cage she'd locked herself into. The money had been transferred as promised. $5 million that had made Brooklyn's debt disappear and left enough to secure her sister's future. But money couldn't ease the growing tension between her and Zahir, or the way her pulse quickened whenever he entered a room. The sound of tires on gravel made her look up. Zahir's black Mercedes pulled through the security gates, followed by 2 SUVs filled with bodyguards. Even from a distance, she could see the rigid line of his shoulders, the tension in his movements as he climbed out of the car. 20 minutes later, he appeared in her doorway without knocking. His usually perfect appearance was disheveled, tie loosened, jacket wrinkled, exhaustion etched in the lines around his eyes. We need to talk. He closed the door behind him and engaged the lock. Good afternoon to you too. She set down her coffee cup. Rough day at the office. Someone leaked information about our arrangement to the Kadesh Council. His voice was deadly quiet. They're demanding I return home immediately to explain myself. Her blood turned cold. What kind of information? Enough to know that I'm attempting to produce an heir through unconventional means. Not enough to identify you specifically. He moved to the window, his hands clasped behind his back. Yet, what does that mean for us? It means someone close to me is playing a very dangerous game. He turned to face her. It means you're no longer safe here. I thought this place was supposed to be secure. secure from external threats, not from betrayal within my own circle. His jaw tightened. Pack your things. We're leaving tonight. Where are we going? Somewhere they'll never think to look. He started toward the door, then stopped. Sarah, I need you to understand something. If my enemies discover your identity before you give birth to my heir, they won't hesitate to eliminate you. The casual way he said it made her stomach drop. Eliminate. You're a threat to their plans for succession. In their minds, removing you removes the problem. His dark eyes met hers. I won't let that happen. Before she could respond, he was gone, leaving her alone with the weight of his promise and the growing realization that she'd underestimated the danger she was in. 2 hours later, as she packed her belongings into a single suitcase, her phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Stop what you're doing, or your sister pays the price. Her hands shook as she screenshotted the message and deleted it. Someone knew about Brooklyn. Someone was watching. A soft knock at her door made her jump. Come in. River Montgomery, Zahir's head of security, stepped inside. The man was built like a linebacker, but moved with surprising grace. His scarred face had probably been handsome once, before whatever had happened to leave those marks. Your Highness asked me to escort you to the car, miss. His voice carried a slight southern drawl. We'll be leaving through the service entrance. River, can I ask you something? Depends on the question. How long have you worked for Prince Zahir? 8 years. He moved to the window and checked the grounds below. Since before he was heir to anything. Back when he was just another royal spare trying to make something of himself. You're loyal to him. I'm loyal to good men doing right by their people. River turned back to her. And I've never met a better man than Prince Zahir. Even when he's paying random women to have his babies. River's expression didn't change. Even then. Especially then. He picked up her suitcase. A man who'd sacrifice his own happiness for his country's future isn't random about anything, miss. He chose you for reasons that go deeper than convenience. Before she could ask what he meant, an explosion rocked the mansion. The windows shattered, sending glass flying across the room. River threw himself over her, protecting her from the debris as alarms began blaring throughout the house. What the hell was that? Sarah struggled to breathe under his weight. Car bomb. River pulled her to her feet, checking her for injuries. Probably meant for the prince's Mercedes. He spoke into his earpiece. Package is secure. Moving to extraction point Beta. Someone tried to kill him? Someone tried to kill both of you. River guided her toward the door, his weapon drawn. Which means they know more than we thought. They moved through corridors filled with smoke and the sound of running feet. Zahir appeared at the top of the main staircase, his face grim as he spoke rapidly into his phone. When he saw them, relief flashed across his features. Is she hurt? Minor cuts from the glass. Nothing serious. River's voice was all business. Security breach is bigger than we thought. Someone had inside knowledge of your schedule. Zahir's expression darkened. Then we assume everyone is compromised until proven otherwise. His eyes met Sarah's. Are you all right? She nodded, though her hands were still shaking. Your car. Destroyed. Along with any forensic evidence about who planted the bomb. He moved toward them. We're using the backup extraction plan. Which is, we disappear. Zahir's smile held no humor. Completely. As they made their way through the mansion's secret passages toward an underground garage she hadn't known existed, Sarah realized that signing that contract had been the easy part. Staying alive long enough to fulfill it was going to be the real challenge. The man she'd agreed to bear a child for wasn't just a prince with succession problems. He was a target, which meant she was one too. And somewhere in his inner circle, someone was playing a game where the stakes were measured in lives. The question was, who could they trust when everyone around them had secrets to hide? The safe house in the Adirondack Mountains looked like any other luxury cabin, complete with rustic charm and breathtaking views. What the casual observer couldn't see were the bulletproof windows, reinforced walls, and enough security equipment to protect a small army. Sarah sat cross-legged on the leather sofa, staring at the documents River had found hidden in her old apartment. Her hands trembled as she read the same paragraph for the third time, the words refusing to make sense. This can't be right. She looked up at Zahir, who stood by the stone fireplace with his arms crossed. These papers say my family descended from some ancient royal bloodline. The House of Blackthorn. His voice was carefully neutral. Former rulers of the Northern Territories, before they were absorbed into modern-day Kadesh 3 centuries ago. You knew? The accusation hung in the air between them. You knew who I was when you made that offer. I suspected. He moved closer but kept his distance, as if approaching a wounded animal. Your surname, your bearing, certain physical characteristics that mark the old bloodlines. The investigation I ordered confirmed it. Sarah stood abruptly, the papers scattering to the floor. Physical characteristics? What am I? A prize horse you were breeding? That's not what this is about. Then what is it about? She gestured at the documents. Because these papers say my family was considered traitors to the crown. They say we were exiled and stripped of all titles. They also say your bloodline carries the mark of true sovereignty. Zahir's jaw tightened. Something my own family has been trying to breed back into our line for generations. The pieces clicked together with sickening clarity. You didn't choose me randomly. You chose me because of my blood. I chose you because you saved my life. His dark eyes flashed with something that might have been anger. Everything else was a fortunate coincidence. Fortunate for who? She backed away from him. You've been lying to me from the beginning. I've been protecting you from a truth you weren't ready to hear. He ran a hand through his hair. Did you think it was coincidence that someone tried to kill us both? The old rivalries run deep, Sarah. There are people who would rather see both our bloodlines extinct than united. United? The word came out strangled. We're not united. We have a business arrangement. Do we? He stepped closer, and she could see the conflict warring in his expression. Because the way you look at me, the way your pulse races when I'm near, suggests something different. Heat flooded her cheeks. You're imagining things. Am I? He was close enough now that she could smell his cologne, feel the warmth radiating from his body. Then why does your breath catch every time I enter a room? Why do you watch me when you think I'm not looking? Because I'm trying to figure out what other lies you've told me. But her voice lacked conviction, and they both knew it. The moment stretched between them, charged with tension and unspoken truths. Then Zahir's phone buzzed, shattering the spell. He answered it with a sharp greeting in Arabic, his expression growing darker with each passing second. What is it? Sarah asked when he hung up. Darius has returned to Kadesh. He's calling for an emergency session of the Royal Council to discuss my fitness to rule. Zahir moved to the window, checking the tree line with practiced eyes. He's claiming I've dishonored the family by consorting with enemies of the state. Enemies of the state? The Blackthorn line was officially declared treasonous after the Northern Territories rebellion. In the eyes of Kadesh law, any relationship with your family could be seen as collusion with former enemies. But that was 300 years ago. Royal grudges have long memories. He turned back to her. There's something else. The pregnancy test came back positive. The words hit her like a physical blow. She sank back onto the sofa, her hands instinctively moving to her still flat stomach. I'm pregnant. With a child who carries both bloodlines. A child who could either unite two ancient houses or destroy everything I've worked to build. Destroy how? If Darius convinces the council that I've committed treason by mixing royal blood with that of exiled enemies, they could strip me of my titles and declare our child illegitimate. His voice was grim. Or they could decide that both you and the baby pose too great a threat to the existing order. The full weight of her situation crashed down on her. She wasn't just carrying a prince's heir. She was carrying a child whose very existence could start a war. There's more. Zahir sat down across from her, his expression grave. River found evidence that someone has been tracking your family for years. Your parents' death, the collapse of your firm, even Brooklyn's gambling debts. None of it was coincidence. What are you saying? I'm saying someone has been systematically destroying your family's resources and reputation. Someone who knew exactly who you were long before I did. The room felt like it was spinning. Darius. It's the most logical explanation. He's been positioning himself as my successor for years. Discovering the existence of Blackthorn descendants would give him the perfect weapon to discredit me. So he ruined my life as insurance? Rage bubbled up in her chest. He destroyed everything I cared about just in case he needed leverage? It appears that way. Zahir's voice was carefully controlled, which means he's been planning this for much longer than we realized. Sarah stood and walked to the window, staring out at the pristine mountain wilderness. Somewhere out there, people were hunting her because of blood she'd never known she carried. Her child would be born into a world where ancient feuds could mean the difference between a crown and a grave. What happens now? Now we disappear completely. New identities, new location, total radio silence until the baby is born. Zahir joined her at the window. After that, we have choices to make. What kind of choices? Whether to fight for what's rightfully ours or walk away and let Darius win. She looked at his reflection in the glass, seeing past the royal bearing to the man underneath. What do you want to do? I want to protect you and our child. His voice was quiet but fierce. Everything else is secondary. The word, our, sent an unexpected warmth through her chest. For the first time since learning about her heritage, she felt like she wasn't facing this alone. Then we disappear, she said. At least until we figure out who we can trust. River is arranging new documents. We'll be Jonathan and Sarah Mitchell, a married couple from Oregon looking for a quiet place to start a family. Married couple? It's the best cover story. His eyes met hers in the reflection. Unless you have objections to pretending to be my wife. The word, wife, should have terrified her. Instead, it sent a thrill through her that she didn't want to examine too closely. I suppose I've pretended stranger things. But as they stood there watching the sun set over the mountains, both of them knew they weren't pretending anymore. Whatever this was between them had moved far beyond their original arrangement. The question was whether they would live long enough to explore it. 3 months had passed since they'd become Jonathan and Sarah Mitchell, and Sarah was beginning to believe they might actually be safe. The small town of Cedar Falls, Vermont, had welcomed the young married couple with the kind of friendly curiosity reserved for newcomers who paid their bills on time and kept to themselves. Sarah's growing belly earned her sympathetic smiles from the local women, while Zahir's careful charm had won over the men at the hardware store where he'd taken a part-time job to maintain their cover. It should have been perfect. Instead, Sarah felt like she was living in a beautiful lie that grew more complicated every day. The baby's moving. She pressed Zahir's hand to her rounded stomach as they sat on the porch of their rented cottage. The evening air carried the scent of pine and the distant sound of children playing in the park. His eyes widened as tiny feet kicked against his palm. Strong, like his mother. Call it intuition. Zahir's smile was soft in a way that made her chest tight. My son will be a fighter. Our son, she corrected automatically, then froze as she realized what she'd said. The word hung between them, loaded with implications neither of them was ready to address. They'd been living as husband and wife for months, sharing meals and conversations and quiet moments that felt dangerously real. But reality was a luxury they couldn't afford. Zahir's phone buzzed, breaking the spell. His expression changed as he read the message, all warmth disappearing from his features. What is it? River. He's in town. Zahir stood abruptly. Something's wrong. 20 minutes later, River Montgomery sat in their small kitchen, looking like he'd aged years in the months since they'd last seen him. His usually impeccable appearance was rumpled, and there were dark circles under his eyes. Darius knows where you are. He accepted the coffee Sarah offered, but didn't drink it. He's been feeding information to the Royal Council for months. Claims he has proof that you've been colluding with Blackthorn descendants to undermine Kadesh sovereignty. What kind of proof? Zahir's voice was deadly quiet. Photos, financial records, documentation of your relationship with Sarah going back to before the assassination attempt. River's expression was grim. He's painted a picture of a prince seduced by an enemy agent who's carrying his illegitimate child. Sarah's blood turned cold. He's been watching us this whole time? Longer than that. River pulled out a tablet and showed them surveillance photos. These go back to your first meeting. Someone's been documenting everything. The photos were damning. Sarah and Zahir in the hotel penthouse, leaving the Hamptons mansion together. Even recent shots of them in Cedar Falls, looking every inch the happy couple they'd been pretending to be. How did he get these? Inside job. Someone close to Prince Zahir has been feeding Darius information from the beginning. River's jaw tightened. Someone who knew about the safe houses, the security protocols, even your new identities. Who? Zahir's voice carried a dangerous edge. Still working on that. But whoever it is, they've been playing a long game. River closed the tablet. There's more. Darius has convinced the council to issue a formal decree. Either you return to Kadesh within 30 days to face charges of treason, or you're stripped of all titles and declared an enemy of the state. And if I return, you'll be arrested the moment you set foot on Kadesh soil. Sarah will be charged as a foreign agent, and your child will be declared illegitimate. River's expression was bleak. Darius becomes heir by default. So we run. Sarah's hand moved protectively to her belly. We disappear completely. Change our names. Move somewhere he'll never find us. You can run, River said quietly. But your sister can't. The words hit like a physical blow. What do you mean? Brooklyn was arrested 3 days ago in Chicago. Charges of conspiracy to commit treason against a foreign government. River's voice was gentle but implacable. She's being held pending extradition to Kadesh. That's impossible. Sarah stood so quickly her chair fell backward. Brooklyn doesn't know anything about any of this. Doesn't matter. Darius has evidence suggesting she's been acting as a liaison between you and other Blackthorn descendants. River pulled up another file on his tablet. Bank records showing payments from offshore accounts. Communication logs suggesting coordinated activities against Kadesh interests. All fabricated, of course, but convincing enough to hold up in court, especially with a sympathetic judge. River looked between them. Darius is forcing your hand. Either you surrender yourselves, or your sister becomes collateral damage. Zahir was silent for a long moment, staring out the kitchen window at the peaceful street beyond. When he spoke, his voice carried the weight of royal authority she'd almost forgotten he possessed. How long do we have? Brooklyn's extradition hearing is scheduled for next week. After that, she disappears into the Kadesh legal system. River's meaning was clear. Once she's on Kadesh soil, there's nothing we can do to protect her. Then we don't let that happen. Zahir turned back to them. What resources do we have? Less than Darius thinks, more than he knows. River's smile held no humor. I've been building a network of loyalists within the Royal Guard. Men who believe in the true succession, not Darius's version of it. How many? Enough to make a difference if we play this right. River leaned forward. But it means giving up the safety of anonymity. The moment we move against Darius, we're committed to seeing this through to the end. Sarah looked between the two men, seeing the weight of decision settling on Zahir's shoulders. She thought about Brooklyn, scared and alone in a jail cell because of choices Sarah had made. Thought about the child growing inside her, heir to a legacy she was only beginning to understand. What are you thinking? She asked quietly. I'm thinking Darius has made a mistake. Zahir's eyes met hers, and she saw the prince she'd first encountered on that Manhattan street. He's assumed we'll run or surrender. He hasn't considered a third option, which is, we stop running and start fighting. His voice carried absolute certainty. It's time to reclaim what's rightfully ours. River nodded slowly. It won't be easy. Darius has the support of the old guard, the traditionalists who fear change. Then we give them something to fear more than change. Zahir moved to the window again. We give them the truth. The truth about what? About who really orchestrated the attacks on both our families. About Darius's real plans for Kadesh. About what happens when ambitious men decide that power is more important than honor. He turned back to them. We expose everything. Sarah felt a chill that had nothing to do with the Vermont evening. That's war. Yes, Zahir said simply. It is. The quiet life they'd built in Cedar Falls was over. Sarah and Jonathan Mitchell were about to disappear forever, replaced by a prince and the woman carrying his heir, ready to fight for a throne that might not exist when the dust settled. But Brooklyn would come home. Their child would have a future. And perhaps, if they were very lucky and very strong, they might find a way to be together when it was all over. The games were about to begin in earnest, and this time, Sarah wasn't planning to lose. The labor pains started during the blizzard that cut Cedar Falls off from the outside world. Sarah gripped the edge of the kitchen counter as another contraction tore through her, stronger than the last. Outside, wind howled through the trees, and snow fell so heavily she couldn't see beyond the front porch. The baby wasn't due for another 3 weeks, but apparently their child had inherited royal impatience. How far apart? Zahir appeared at her side, his face pale but determined. They'd planned for this moment, but not for being trapped in a snowstorm with no way to reach the hospital 20 miles away. For minutes, she breathed through the pain. They're getting stronger. The roads are completely blocked. River hung up his phone, snow still clinging to his jacket from checking the driveway. Emergency services can't get through until the storm passes. Then we do this here. Zahir's voice carried absolute certainty. River, get the medical supplies we prepared. Sarah, we're going upstairs. I can't have a baby here. But even as she said it, another contraction proved her wrong. This baby was coming whether they were ready or not. 2 hours later, Sarah lay in their bedroom while Zahir knelt beside her, holding her hand and murmuring encouragement in Arabic. River had transformed into an unexpectedly competent midwife, his military training apparently including field medicine. "I can see the head," River announced. One more push. Sarah bore down with everything she had, and suddenly the world changed forever. A thin cry filled the room, and River was lifting a tiny, perfect child into the lamplight. A son. River's voice was thick with emotion. A healthy son. Zahir's intake of breath was sharp as River placed the baby in Sarah's arms. The child was beautiful, with dark hair and features that would clearly favor his father. But as Sarah unwrapped the blanket to check his tiny fingers and toes, she froze. "Zahir." Her voice was barely a whisper. "Look at his shoulder." There, just below the baby's left shoulder blade, was a birthmark unlike anything she'd ever seen. It wasn't the typical red or brown marking found on most newborns. This was intricate, almost like a tiny tattoo, shaped like two intertwining crescents. River moved closer, his expression shifting from joy to awe to something approaching fear. "That's impossible." "What is it?" Sarah looked between the two men, both staring at her son like he was a miracle or a curse. "The mark of the dual crown." Zahir's voice was reverent. "It hasn't appeared on a child born in over 4 centuries. What does it mean?" "According to legend, the mark appears only on children born to unite warring royal houses. It signifies a ruler who will bring peace through strength, wisdom through understanding." River's voice dropped to a whisper. "A king who will unite not just territories, but bloodlines that have been separated by centuries of conflict." Sarah looked down at her son, this tiny being who'd just entered the world carrying the weight of ancient prophecies on his impossibly small shoulders. "So the stories about our bloodlines are true." "More than true." Zahir touched the mark with gentle fingers. "This proves that your family was never meant to be exiled. You were meant to return, to fulfill the prophecy that would unite both houses under one crown. A crown that Darius wants to claim for himself." River moved to the window, checking the storm outside. "If he discovers the mark, he'll stop at nothing to eliminate the threat. Then he won't discover it." Sarah's voice was fierce with maternal protection. "Not until we're ready." The baby stirred in her arms, opening dark eyes that seemed far too wise for someone only hours old. When his gaze fixed on hers, she felt the world shift around them. This wasn't just about saving Brooklyn anymore, or honoring a contract, or even about the growing love between her and Zahir. This was about a child who could change the course of history. "We need to move quickly." Zahir stood, already shifting into tactical mode. "The storm will buy us maybe 12 hours before Darius's people can reach us." "Reach us how?" Sarah struggled to sit up, exhaustion weighing on her like a physical force. "I intercepted communications an hour ago." River's expression was grim. "Darius knows about the baby. He's mobilizing a team to retrieve both you and the child as soon as weather permits." "How could he know already?" "Because our leak isn't random intelligence gathering." Zahir's jaw tightened. "Someone has been feeding him real-time information about everything we do. Someone close enough to know about the labor pains, the storm, the fact that we're trapped here." River pulled out his weapon and checked the ammunition. "Someone who's been in contact with us recently." The implications hit them simultaneously. There were only 3 people who'd known about Sarah's condition tonight. Only 3 people who could have passed information to Darius so quickly. The doctor. Sarah's blood turned cold. Dr. Peterson, who's been monitoring the pregnancy. He was supposed to be here tonight if the roads were clear. Dr. Peterson, who insisted on weekly checkups when monthly would have been sufficient. Zahir's voice carried deadly certainty. Dr. Peterson, who always asked detailed questions about our security arrangements and backup plans. He's been reporting to Darius for months. River was already moving toward the door, which means they know everything about our defenses, our escape routes, our resources. Outside, the wind was beginning to die down. The storm that had protected them was passing, and with it their window of safety. "How long do we have?" Sarah clutched the baby closer. "Maybe 4 hours before they can get a helicopter in the air. 6 before ground vehicles can navigate the roads." Zahir moved to the closet and began pulling out emergency supplies they'd hoped never to need. "We use that time to disappear completely. Where can we go that they won't find us?" "Somewhere Darius would never think to look." River's smile was sharp with anticipation. "We're going home." Home. To Kadesh. Zahir met her startled gaze. The last place anyone would expect us to run is directly into enemy territory. That's suicide. That's strategy. His dark eyes blazed with determination. Darius expects us to keep running, to stay on the defensive. He's not prepared for us to take the fight to him. Sarah looked down at her son, this tiny prince with an ancient mark who'd just changed everything. You're talking about invading your own country. I'm talking about reclaiming it. Zahir knelt beside the bed again. Darius has overplayed his hand. By moving against Brooklyn, by trying to take our son, he's shown his true nature to people who still believe in honor. River's network. More than that, there are others who've been waiting for a legitimate reason to oppose Darius's ambitions. River was already packing supplies. Men who remember what real leadership looks like. The baby made a soft sound in her arms, and Sarah felt her heart break and rebuild itself around this perfect, impossible child. 3 days ago, she'd been Sarah Mitchell, hiding in Vermont and hoping for a quiet life. Now she was holding a future king whose very existence could reshape the balance of power in a kingdom she'd never seen. If we do this, there's no going back. There was never any going back. Zahir's hand covered hers where it rested on their son's chest. From the moment you saved my life on that Manhattan street, we were always heading toward this. Toward war. Toward home. His voice was soft, but absolutely certain. All three of us, together. The storm was ending, but another one was about to begin. And this time, they wouldn't be running from it. They'd be the center of it, 3 people against a kingdom, fighting for the right to exist and the chance to build something better from the ashes of ancient feuds. Sarah looked at the mark on her son's shoulder, then at the man who'd given her both impossible love and an impossible future. Then let's go reclaim your kingdom. Outside, the first helicopter engines were beginning to echo across the mountains. The royal palace of Kadesh rose from the desert like a jeweled crown, its golden domes catching the first light of dawn. From her position in the rocky outcropping 2 miles away, Sarah watched through binoculars as guards changed shifts at the main gate. Her son slept against her chest in a specially designed carrier, his tiny face peaceful despite the chaos surrounding them. Thermal imaging shows 60 guards on the perimeter, another 40 inside the main building. River lowered his equipment and turned to Zahir. Darius has tripled security since he took power. Since he stole power, Zahir corrected grimly. 3 weeks had passed since they'd fled Vermont. 3 weeks of traveling through underground networks and safe houses while Darius consolidated his control over Kadesh. The man had moved quickly once Zahir was declared a fugitive, assuming the throne through a hastily convened council session that violated half the kingdom's constitutional laws. Brooklyn's being held in the East Wing. River pointed to a section of the palace complex. 3rd floor, overlooking the courtyard. 2 guards at all times, but they rotate every 4 hours. What about the rest of the prisoners? According to our inside sources, there aren't any other prisoners. Just your sister. River's expression was troubled, which suggests this was always about leverage, not justice. Sarah adjusted the baby's carrier and checked her weapon for the 10th time. The modified assault rifle felt alien in her hands, but River had insisted she learn to use it. How do we know your inside sources are reliable? Because some of them have been loyal to the true crown for generations. River's smile held no humor. Men like Captain Sterling Ashford, who's been waiting 20 years for a chance to correct the mistakes of the past. A figure emerged from behind a cluster of rocks 50 yards away, moving with the disciplined precision of a career soldier. Captain Ashford was everything River had promised, weathered, competent, and burning with quiet fury at what Darius had done to the kingdom he'd sworn to protect. The council meeting starts in 2 hours. Ashford crouched beside them, his desert camouflage making him nearly invisible against the sandstone. Darius is presenting evidence of your alleged crimes to justify your permanent exile. Evidence he manufactured, Zahir said. Of course, but it's convincing enough to sway the traditionalists who want stability above all else. Ashford pulled out a tablet showing floor plans of the palace interior. The good news is that most of the royal guard remembers you, Your Highness. They remember what leadership looked like before Darius started playing politics with people's lives. How many can we count on? 40 confirmed loyalists inside the palace. Another 60 positioned throughout the capital. Ashford's finger traced routes on the digital map. enough to secure key positions and hold them long enough for you to address the council directly. And if the council refuses to listen, then we make them listen. River's voice carried the weight of a man who'd seen too many battles. The mark of the dual crown isn't just symbolic, Your Highness. There are still people in this kingdom who believe in prophecy, who remember the old stories. Sarah looked down at her sleeping son, this tiny child whose birthmark had become the rallying cry for a revolution. You're talking about using a baby as propaganda. I'm talking about using the truth as a weapon, Ashford said quietly. Darius has built his claim on lies and manipulation. Your son represents something he can never corrupt, the fulfillment of ancient promises. The people need hope, River added. They need to believe that change is possible, that the future can be better than the present. A distant sound made them all freeze. Helicopter rotors, still far away but approaching fast. Zahir raised his binoculars and scanned the horizon. 3 aircraft, military configuration. His voice was tense. They're heading directly for us. Impossible. Ashford checked his communications equipment. We swept for tracking devices, changed routes twice, used dead drops for all intelligence. Unless someone leaked our position. River was already gathering their equipment. Someone who knew exactly where we'd be. The helicopters were closer now, their distinctive whine echoing off the canyon walls. Sarah felt ice in her veins as she realized the truth. Dr. Peterson. He's dead, Zahir said. We confirmed it. But his information wasn't. Her mind raced through the possibilities. He'd been reporting to Darius for months. He knew our operational patterns, our contingency plans, our preferred routes. He knew we'd come here. River's face was grim. To this exact position, because it's the only vantage point that offers clear sight lines to both the palace and the escape routes. The helicopters crested the ridge, and suddenly the morning air filled with gunfire. Bullets sparked off the rocks around them as 3 aircraft circled like mechanical vultures, their door gunners laying down suppressing fire. Move! Zahir grabbed Sarah's arm, pulling her toward a deeper crevice in the rocks. Stay low, protect the baby. She clutched her son against her chest and ran, feeling chips of stone spray her face as bullets chewed up the ground behind them. The baby woke and began crying, his thin wail barely audible over the chaos of rotor wash and automatic weapons. There, River pointed to a cave opening 30 yards ahead. We can hold them off from there. They reached the cave as the first helicopter landed, disgorging soldiers in desert camouflage. Ashford took position at the cave mouth, his rifle spitting return fire at the advancing troops. 8 men in the first wave, he called over his shoulder. More coming from the other birds. How many rounds do we have? Zahir had taken position on the opposite side of the opening, his weapon trained on the approaching soldiers. Enough for maybe 10 minutes of sustained fire. River was already checking escape routes deeper in the cave. After that, we're down to pistols and hope. Sarah pressed herself against the cave wall, trying to calm her crying son while bullets whined overhead. This wasn't how it was supposed to happen. They were supposed to infiltrate the palace quietly, present evidence of Darius's crimes, and restore Zahir to his rightful throne. Instead, they were pinned down in a cave, outgunned and outnumbered. Your Highness, a voice echoed from outside, amplified by some kind of speaker system. Prince Zahir, I know you can hear me. The firing stopped abruptly, leaving only the sound of helicopter engines and the baby's fading cries. Zahir met Sarah's eyes across the cave, and she saw her own fear reflected in his face. This is Colonel Marcus Webb, acting under direct orders from His Majesty King Darius. The voice was professionally neutral, carrying the authority of a career soldier. You are surrounded and outgunned. Surrender now, and the woman and child will be treated according to international law. International law, according to Darius, River muttered, which means they disappear forever. You have 2 minutes to consider our offer, Webb continued. After that, we will be forced to use more aggressive tactics. Zahir closed his eyes for a moment, and when he opened them, they blazed with royal determination. Ashford, what's the status of your people inside the palace? Standing by for your signal. River, can you get a message to the capital? Already done. Every loyalist in the kingdom knows we're here. Then we don't surrender. Zahir looked at Sarah and their son. We fight. Against 3 helicopters and 30 soldiers? against the lie that Darius represents legitimate authority. His voice carried absolute certainty. Sometimes the only way to win is to refuse to lose. Outside, Colonel Webb's voice echoed again. 1 minute remaining. Sarah looked at her son, then at the man she'd come to love, then at the kingdom spread out below them. Somewhere in that palace, Brooklyn was waiting for rescue. Somewhere in the capital, people were waiting for hope. And here in this cave, holding a baby marked by destiny, she had to choose between safety and truth. If we do this, we might not survive. If we don't do this, we'll wish we hadn't. Zahir moved to the cave mouth, his weapon ready. River, signal the palace. Tell them it's time. And if this doesn't work, then we go down fighting for something that matters. Zahir looked back at her one more time. I love you, Sarah. Whatever happens, remember that. Before she could respond, he was moving, River and Ashford flanking him as they prepared to face impossible odds. Outside, Colonel Webb's deadline was about to expire, and with it their last chance at a quiet resolution. But quiet had never been an option, not for a prince fighting to reclaim his kingdom, not for a woman protecting her child, not for a baby born to unite ancient enemies. The war for Kadesh was about to begin in earnest, and sometimes love was worth fighting for, even when the odds were stacked against you. The sound that changed everything wasn't gunfire or explosions. It was the deep, resonant toll of the palace bells, echoing across the desert like a voice from heaven. Colonel Webb's amplified voice cut off mid-sentence as the ancient bronze bells of Kadesh rang out in a pattern that hadn't been heard in over 2 decades. 3 long tolls, followed by 7 short ones, repeated 3 times. The call of true succession. That's impossible. Webb's voice crackled through his radio, no longer confident. The bells are controlled from the throne room. Only the rightful king can. His words were drowned out by a new sound, the roar of aircraft engines, but different this time. Military jets screamed overhead, their Kadesh markings clearly visible as they circled the area in a defensive pattern. Royal Air Force, Ashford breathed, lowering his weapon. Captain Nasir came through. Below them, chaos erupted in the ranks of Darius's soldiers. Radio chatter filled the air as confused voices demanded orders, clarification, confirmation. The helicopters that had seemed so threatening moments before now looked small and vulnerable beneath the circling jets. River's radio crackled to life. Ghost Leader, this is Palace Actual. The throne room is secure. Repeat, the throne room is secure. Ashford's people, River explained, his grin fierce with satisfaction. They moved faster than expected. Prince Zahir. Colonel Webb's voice had lost all its military authority. I'm receiving conflicting orders. The palace is claiming you've been restored to power, but King Darius is no longer king. A new voice interrupted, broadcasting on all frequencies. Captain Sterling Ashford's measured tones carried the weight of absolute authority. By order of the Emergency Council of Kadesh, and in accordance with ancient law, Prince Zahir al-Rashid is hereby recognized as the rightful sovereign of this kingdom. All forces are ordered to stand down immediately. The silence that followed was deafening. Then, one by one, Darius's soldiers began lowering their weapons. The helicopter's engines wound down as pilots received stand-down orders from their own command structure. It's over, Sarah whispered, hardly daring to believe it. Not quite. Zahir's expression remained tense. We still need to reach the palace. Darius won't give up without a fight. They emerged from the cave cautiously, weapons ready, but no longer expecting immediate attack. Colonel Webb approached with his hands visible, his face a mask of professional confusion. Your Highness, he said carefully, I apologize for the misunderstanding. My orders came directly from a usurper, Zahir finished. You were following orders, Colonel. That's not a crime. What are your orders now, sir? Escort us to the palace. And Colonel, send word ahead that we're bringing proof of the legitimacy of our claim. An hour later, they stood in the throne room of the royal palace of Kadesh, surrounded by a mixture of loyal guards and council members who looked like they'd aged years in the past few weeks. The ancient chamber was magnificent, soaring ceilings decorated with intricate mosaics, marble columns that had stood for centuries, and at the center, the throne that had been empty since Darius's hasty departure. Where is he? Zahir asked Captain Ashford. Gone. Fled the capital the moment the bells started ringing. Ashford's expression was grim. but not before trying to destroy as much evidence as possible. Evidence of what? Everything. The financial manipulation that destroyed the Blackthorn family. The assassination attempts. The fabricated charges against your sister. Ashford gestured to boxes of documents lining the walls. He kept records of everything, probably his insurance. Now it's all evidence of his crimes. Brooklyn, safe. Medical attention, full protection, and already asking when she can see you and the baby. Relief flooded through Sarah so powerfully she nearly collapsed. Her sister was alive, safe, free. The nightmare was finally over. There's something else. An elderly man stepped forward, his robes marking him as a senior council member. Your Highness, we need to address the matter of succession immediately. The kingdom requires stability. The kingdom has stability, Zahir replied. I am the rightful heir. Yes, but... The man's eyes flicked nervously to Sarah and the baby. The circumstances of your return, the allegations about your relationship with enemy bloodlines, are about to be resolved permanently. Zahir moved to stand beside Sarah, his hand gentle on their son's head. Counselor Rahman, would you please examine this child? The elderly man approached reluctantly, clearly uncomfortable with the situation. But when Sarah pulled back the blanket to reveal the mark on her son's shoulder, his intake of breath was sharp and immediate. The mark of the dual crown. His voice was reverent. It's real, as real as the prophecy that foretold it. Zahir's voice carried across the throne room, as real as the ancient promise that one day, the divided houses would be united again. Murmurs rippled through the assembled counselors as word of the mark spread. Some looked skeptical, others awed, but all of them understood the implications. This wasn't just about political succession anymore. This was about the fulfillment of legends older than the kingdom itself. The Blackthorn line was never truly exiled, another counselor said slowly. They were set aside, waiting for the time when the houses could be reunited. And that time is now. Zahir extended his hand to Sarah. I present to you Sarah Blackthorn, descendant of the Northern Territories, mother of the prophesied heir, and the woman I intend to make my queen. The words sent a shock through the chamber. Several counselors began speaking at once, their voices rising in excitement, concern, and confusion. But Sarah only heard Zahir's voice, only saw his eyes as he looked at her with an expression that made her heart race. Is that a proposal? She asked quietly. It's a promise. His smile was soft but certain. If you'll have me. If you'll take on a kingdom along with a man who's been in love with you since the day you saved his life. The baby stirred in her arms, making a soft sound that seemed almost like approval. She looked around the throne room, at the faces of people who would be her subjects, her responsibility, her family. Then she looked back at Zahir, this prince who'd become so much more than she'd ever imagined possible. Yes, she said simply. The coronation took place 3 days later, in a ceremony that combined ancient tradition with modern necessity. Sarah stood beside Zahir as they were crowned together, joint rulers of a kingdom that had never had a queen with equal power to the king. Their son slept peacefully through the entire ceremony, the mark of the dual crown hidden beneath ceremonial robes that would one day be his. Brooklyn stood in the front row, tears streaming down her face as she watched her sister become royalty. The bruises from her captivity were fading, and the smile she wore was brighter than any crown. Your Majesties, Counselor Rahman said as he placed the final crown on Sarah's head, may your reign bring the peace and prosperity foretold by the ancients. Later, as the celebration continued in the great hall below, Zahir and Sarah stood on their private balcony overlooking the capital city. Lights twinkled in the darkness like earthbound stars, and the air carried the sounds of a people celebrating hope renewed. Any regrets? Zahir asked, his arms around her waist as they watched their kingdom. Just one. She leaned back against his chest. I wish we could have figured this out without all the running and shooting and near-death experiences. Where would be the fun in that? She laughed, the sound carrying across the night air. Is this real? Sometimes I still feel like I'm going to wake up in that apartment in Manhattan, broke and desperate. This is real. He turned her in his arms, his hands framing her face. We're real. Our son is real. Our future is real. What kind of future? The kind where a prince and a homeless girl fall in love and change the world. His kiss was soft, full of promise and absolute certainty. The kind where ancient prophecies come true and impossible things happen every day. And they lived happily ever after? They lived. His smile was radiant with joy. Happily, passionately, completely. With a kingdom to run, a son to raise, and a love that conquered everything thrown against it. In the nursery adjoining their chambers, the future king of Kadesh slept peacefully, his tiny hand curled around a silver rattle that bore the intertwined crescents of two ancient houses finally united. The mark of the dual crown was hidden beneath soft fabric, but its promise had already been fulfilled. Love had conquered politics, truth had defeated lies, and two people who should never have met had found their way to a throne that waited for them to make it whole. The kingdom of Kadesh had its king and queen, and their reign would be remembered not for the battles they'd fought to claim it, but for the peace they'd built once the fighting was done. Sometimes, the best love stories were the ones where the impossible happened, and two hearts found their way home to each other across a world determined to keep them apart. This was one of those stories, and it was just beginning.